The auction block was nothing more than a weathered wooden platform at the edge of Whisper Creek, Colorado territory, but to Catherine Adams, it might as well have been the edge of the world. Her arms ached from holding her 3-month-old daughter Emma close to her chest, trying to shield the infant from the harsh April sun of 1873 as the auctioneer's voice rang out over the gathered crowd of rough-looking men. Next up, we got ourselves a fine young woman with a baby. Can cook, clean, and sew. Starting bid at $20. Catherine fought back tears as she stared at the dusty ground. How had her life come to this? 6 months ago, she'd been happily married to Thomas, looking forward to their baby's birth. Then the influenza swept through their Kansas homestead. Thomas was gone within days, leaving her alone, pregnant, and eventually destitute. Her husband's cousin had offered help, only to bring her west and sell her to pay his gambling debts. $25, called a greasy-haired man with tobacco-stained teeth. $30, shouted another, his eyes roving over her in a way that made Catherine clutch Emma tighter. $50, came a calm, deep voice from the back of the crowd. The auctioneer squinted against the sun. $50 from Mr. Oliver Calloway. Any other bids, gentlemen? The crowd murmured, but no one challenged the bid. Catherine risked a glance at her buyer. He stood tall at the back, broad-shouldered in a worn leather vest, his face partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Unlike the others, he wasn't leering at her, but studying her with serious eyes. Sold to Mr. Calloway for $50. The auctioneer banged his gavel, and Catherine felt her knees weaken. Oliver Calloway approached the platform, paid the auctioneer, then climbed the steps. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with sun-weathered skin, a straight nose, and kind eyes the color of the sky after a storm. A thin scar ran along his jawline. "Mrs.?" he asked quietly. "Adams," she whispered. "Catherine Adams." He nodded once. "And the little one?" "Emma," Catherine answered, surprised by his interest in her child's name. Oliver glanced at the baby, then back to Catherine's face. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Come with me," he said, not touching her but gesturing toward a wagon at the edge of the crowd. Catherine followed, her legs shaking beneath her tattered skirts. What would he expect of her? What kind of man purchased a woman and her child at auction? They reached his wagon, and he offered a hand to help her climb up to the seat. She hesitated before accepting, balancing Emma carefully. "I have a ranch about 10 miles outside of town," he said as he climbed up beside her. "It's not much, but it's good land." Catherine stared straight ahead, too afraid to respond. Oliver clicked his tongue, and the horses started forward. They rode in silence until they were well beyond the town's borders. Then he surprised her by pulling the wagon to a stop. "Mrs. Adams," he said, turning to her, "I need to make something clear before we go any further." Catherine tensed, clutching Emma tighter. "I bought you today to keep you and your child from men who wouldn't treat you proper," he said, his voice low and steady. "My intentions are honorable." "What are your intentions, Mr. Calloway?" she asked, finding her voice at last. He looked out over the rolling foothills for a long moment. "I've been alone on my ranch too long. I need a wife to help with the place, and that little one needs a father." He met her eyes directly. "I'll be father and husband both, if you'll have me." Catherine drew in a sharp breath. "You're proposing marriage? To a woman you just purchased?" "I'm offering you a choice," he corrected. "You can come to my ranch as my wife, with all the respect that position deserves, or I can take you to Denver where you can make your own way. I'll give you $20 to start." "Why would you do that?" Catherine asked, confused by his generosity. Oliver's gaze dropped to Emma, who had begun to fuss. "My own mother was left widowed with a child. No one helped her." He looked back at Catherine. "I won't force you into anything, Mrs. Adams." Catherine studied him. His clothes were worn but clean, his hands calloused from work. Everything about him spoke of a hard-working man, and there was no cruelty in his eyes. "And if I choose to be your wife?" she asked cautiously. "Then I'll treat you and Emma as my family. I'll provide for you, protect you. I don't expect." He paused, clearing his throat. "Wifely affections until you're ready, if ever. But I would ask for your help with the ranch and your respect as we build a life together." Emma began to cry in earnest now, and Catherine rocked her gently. "She's hungry," Catherine said softly. Oliver nodded and climbed down from the wagon. "There's a creek just over that rise. You can have some privacy there while I water the horses." He helped her down, then busied himself unhitching the team while Catherine walked to the creek. As she sat on a sun-warmed rock and nursed Emma, she considered her options. Denver might offer more opportunities, but she had no skills beyond keeping house, and a woman alone with a baby was vulnerable. Oliver Calloway seemed decent, and he was offering her safety, security, and respect. When she returned to the wagon, Oliver was waiting patiently, his hat in his hands. "I'll be your wife, Mr. Calloway," Catherine said, lifting her chin. "But I want your word that you'll always be kind to Emma." "You have it," he said solemnly. "And please, call me Oliver." "Then I'm Catherine," she replied, "though most call me Kate." He smiled for the first time, transforming his serious face into something quite handsome. "Kate it is." They continued their journey through the golden afternoon light. As the wagon crested a hill, Oliver pointed to a valley below where a modest cabin sat alongside a barn and corral. "That's home," he said, a note of pride in his voice. "400 acres. Best grazing land in the county." Catherine took in the peaceful scene, the cabin with smoke curling from its chimney, cattle dotting the distant pastures, mountains rising majestically beyond. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. "My neighbor, Mrs. Hodges, comes by to help me sometimes. I sent word ahead that I might be bringing home a wife. She'll have supper waiting." Catherine felt a flutter of nervousness. "Mr. Calloway, Oliver, this is all happening so fast." He glanced at her. "I know, and I'm sorry for that. But I promise you, Kate, I'll do right by you and Emma." As they approached the cabin, an elderly woman appeared on the porch, waving enthusiastically. The wagon had barely stopped when she bustled down to meet them. "So you did find yourself a bride," she exclaimed, eyes twinkling behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "And with a baby, too." "Oh my, Mrs. Hodges, this is Catherine Adams," Oliver said, helping Catherine down. "And her daughter Emma." "Catherine, this is my neighbor, Beatrice Hodges." "Welcome, dear. Let me look at you both." Mrs. Hodges took Catherine's free hand and squeezed it warmly. "Such a pretty young thing, and that baby. What a blessing." Catherine felt herself relax slightly in the face of the woman's genuine warmth. "Come inside," Mrs. Hodges continued. "I've got a stew simmering and fresh bread. You must be exhausted, poor dear." The cabin's interior surprised Catherine. Though small, it was clean and well built, with sturdy furniture, including a rocking chair by the fireplace. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with 2 doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. "The small room's been fixed up for the baby," Mrs. Hodges said, noticing Catherine's gaze. "Oliver's been working on it all week. Made a cradle himself." Catherine looked at Oliver in surprise. He shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "Wasn't sure you'd have one," he mumbled. "Thought the little one should have her own place to sleep." "That was very thoughtful," Catherine said, touched by the gesture. Mrs. Hodges bustled about, ladling stew into bowls. "Sit, sit. You must be famished." During the meal, Mrs. Hodges chattered about the neighboring farms and ranches, the town of Whisper Creek, and the upcoming spring social. Catherine was grateful for the woman's ability to carry the conversation, allowing her to eat while feeding Emma small spoonfuls of broth. After dinner, Mrs. Hodges prepared to leave. "I've laid out fresh linens in both bedrooms," she said with a meaningful look at Oliver. "And there's breakfast fixings for morning." When they were alone, an awkward silence fell. Oliver cleared his throat. "I meant what I said about respecting your wishes," he said quietly. "I'll take the sofa tonight." "No," Catherine protested. "This is your home." I insist," he interrupted gently. "You and Emma take the main bedroom. It's more comfortable." Catherine nodded, too tired to argue. "Thank you." Oliver showed her to the bedroom, which was simple but comfortable with a large bed covered in a handmade quilt. The promised cradle sat nearby, lovingly crafted from golden pine. "It's beautiful," Catherine said, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "Made it from the same tree as the bed frame," Oliver explained. "Thought they should match." After he left, Catherine laid Emma in the cradle and sat heavily on the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. This morning, she'd been a prisoner awaiting auction. Tonight, she was the wife of a rancher she'd known less than a day. Yet despite the strangeness of it all, she felt safer than she had in months. She went to the window and looked out at the starlit valley. Oliver Calloway was out there somewhere, checking his livestock before retiring. A man of his word, it seemed. A man who'd built a cradle for a child he hadn't even known existed. Perhaps, Catherine thought as she climbed into bed, this strange arrangement might work after all. The rooster's crow woke Catherine just as dawn was breaking. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. Then Emma whimpered from the cradle, and the previous day's events came rushing back. She was Mrs. Calloway now. The thought felt foreign, almost unreal. Catherine dressed quickly and lifted Emma from the cradle. The baby's diaper needed changing, and Catherine realized with dismay that she had very few baby things left, just the clothes Emma wore and one spare set. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Oliver already up, stoking the fire in the cook stove. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, a tentative smile on his face. "Good morning," he said. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, thank you," Catherine replied, surprised to find it true. The bed had been the most comfortable she'd slept in since leaving Kansas. "I've put coffee on," he said, gesturing to the pot on the stove. "And there's eggs and bacon for breakfast. I'm not much of a cook, though. I can manage breakfast," Catherine offered, eager to make herself useful. Oliver nodded gratefully. "I need to milk the cow and feed the chickens. I'll be back shortly." Once alone, Catherine settled Emma on a blanket on the floor and began preparing breakfast. She found the kitchen well stocked with staples: flour, sugar, coffee, dried beans, and cured meats. There was even a small crock of butter and a jar of preserves. By the time Oliver returned with a pail of fresh milk, she had bacon frying, biscuits in the oven, and eggs ready to cook. "Smells wonderful," he said, setting the milk pail on the counter. His eyes went to Emma, who was contentedly batting at a wooden spoon Catherine had given her. "She seems happy this morning." "She's always best in the mornings," Catherine said, surprised by his interest in the baby's temperament. They ate breakfast in companionable silence, broken only by Emma's occasional coos. Afterward, as Catherine washed the dishes, Oliver cleared his throat. "I was thinking," he said, "we should ride into town today. Get you and Emma some things you might need." Catherine turned, surprised. "That's very kind, but you're my wife now," he said simply. "It's my responsibility to provide for you both." The word wife still felt strange to her ears, but Catherine nodded. "Emma needs diapers and clothes. She's growing so quickly. And you'll need things too," Oliver added. "Dresses, shoes, whatever women require." Catherine felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "I can't ask you to spend so much." Oliver's expression grew serious. "Kate, I may not be a wealthy man, but I'm not poor. The ranch does well. I've saved most of what I've earned these past years, having no one to spend it on." He paused. "Let me do this." Catherine studied him. This man who'd bought her freedom and asked only for her respect in return. "All right," she agreed softly. They set out for Whisper Creek an hour later, Emma wrapped snugly against the morning chill. As they rode, Oliver pointed out the boundaries of his property, the creek that never ran dry even in summer, and the south pasture where he planned to expand his herd. "The ranch was my father's dream," he explained. "He brought my mother here from Boston after they married, but he died in a riding accident before I was born. Mother and I struggled for years until my uncle came to help. He taught me ranching, helped build up the herd. He died 5 years ago." "I'm sorry," Catherine said, touched by his willingness to share his past. Oliver shrugged. "It was hard, but it made me who I am." He glanced at her. "What about you? Where were you before Kansas?" Catherine hesitated, then decided honesty was the best course. "I grew up in Philadelphia. My father was a watchmaker. When he died, my mother and I had to leave our home. We moved in with my aunt in Kansas City, and that's where I met Thomas, my first husband." "He was a good man?" Oliver asked quietly. "Yes," Catherine said, tears pricking at her eyes. "Kind and hardworking. We were very happy." Oliver nodded, his expression solemn. "I'm glad you had that." They reached Whisper Creek before noon. It was Saturday, and the small town was bustling with ranchers and farmers come in for supplies. Catherine felt eyes on them as Oliver helped her down from the wagon. "People will talk," she murmured, suddenly self-conscious about their hasty marriage. "Let them," Oliver replied, offering his arm. "You're my wife, and that's all that matters." The general store was their first stop. The proprietor, a balding man named Harrison, greeted Oliver warmly before his eyes widened at the sight of Catherine and Emma. "Mr. Calloway, I see congratulations are in order." "Thank you," Harrison, Oliver said smoothly. My wife needs to outfit herself and our daughter. We'll need quite a bit. Our daughter. The words sent a strange warmth through Catherine's chest. Harrison was eager to help, showing Catherine bolts of fabric, ready-made dresses, shoes, and household linens. For Emma, there were tiny gowns, diapers, blankets, and even a small silver rattle that Catherine protested was too extravagant. Nonsense, Oliver said, adding it to their growing pile. Every child deserves a few special things. By the time they finished at the general store, they had supplies enough to fill the wagon. Next, Oliver insisted on visiting the town's only restaurant for lunch, where he proudly introduced Catherine to everyone they encountered as my wife. The afternoon was spent at the cobbler's for boots for Catherine, the milliner's for a new bonnet, and finally the barber shop where Oliver got a haircut and trim for his beard. Catherine was surprised to discover he was even more handsome with his dark hair properly cut, revealing strong features that had been partially hidden before. As they prepared to leave town, a woman approached their wagon. She was expensively dressed, with auburn hair piled elegantly beneath a fashionable hat. Oliver Calloway, she said, her voice sharp with surprise. I've been looking everywhere for you. Oliver stiffened beside Catherine. Miss Harper, he said formally. What can I do for you? The woman's eyes flicked to Catherine and Emma, her lips thinning. I see the rumors are true. You've taken a wife. Yes, Oliver said simply. Catherine, this is Vivian Harper, daughter of James Harper who owns the bank. Miss Harper, this is my wife Catherine and our daughter Emma. Catherine noted the careful phrasing, not her daughter, but our daughter, and felt a rush of gratitude. How unexpected, Vivian said, her smile not reaching her eyes. And so sudden. Why, just last month at the Hendersons' dinner, you were quite alone. Sometimes life brings unexpected blessings, Oliver replied evenly. Vivian's gaze lingered on Catherine, assessing. Indeed. Well, I must congratulate you both. Though I confess myself surprised, Oliver. I thought you had other plans for your future. Before Oliver could respond, Emma began to fuss. Catherine bounced her gently, grateful for the distraction. We should get Emma home, Oliver said, tipping his hat to Vivian. Good day, Miss Harper. As they drove away, Catherine couldn't help asking, what did she mean about your having other plans? Oliver's jaw tightened. Vivian Harper has been trying to secure a husband for years. Her father owns half the county, and she believes that makes her entitled to the other half. Were you and she? Catherine left the question hanging. No, Oliver said firmly. Her father has been pressuring me to court her, promising loans for expanding the ranch if I did. But Vivian Harper is not a woman I could ever tie myself to. They rode in silence for a while before Oliver spoke again. I hope I didn't embarrass you, calling Emma our daughter. Catherine shook her head. No, it was kind of you. It wasn't kindness, he said quietly. If you're my wife, then she's my daughter. That's how I see it. Something shifted in Catherine's heart at his words. This man, this stranger who'd become her husband, was offering not just security, but a true family for Emma. Thank you, she whispered. The evening light bathed the valley in gold as they approached the ranch. Catherine found herself thinking that it looked like home. The next 2 weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Catherine took over the household duties, cooking, cleaning, and caring for Emma. Oliver worked from dawn till dusk, tending the cattle, mending fences, and preparing fields for planting. They shared meals and conversation, slowly learning about each other's lives. Catherine discovered that Oliver was well-read, with a small but treasured collection of books. He'd taught himself after having little formal education. He enjoyed Shakespeare and history, and sometimes read aloud in the evenings, his deep voice bringing the words to life. For his part, Oliver seemed fascinated by Catherine's stories of city life in Philadelphia and her knowledge of fine handwork. When she mentioned that she'd studied piano as a girl, he surprised her by revealing a small organ in a corner of the barn. It was my mother's, he explained, dusting off the cover. I keep it out here because the house gets too damp in winter. It probably needs tuning, but... Catherine sat at the instrument, running her fingers over the yellowed keys. The notes were indeed out of tune, but the joy of playing again brought tears to her eyes. I could move it to the house, Oliver offered, watching her face. Would you? Catherine asked, hope rising in her chest. The next day, Oliver and his ranch hand Miguel carefully moved the organ into the main room of the cabin. Catherine spent hours cleaning it, then played simple tunes that made Emma coo with delight and brought a soft smile to Oliver's face. They settled into a partnership of sorts, each respecting the other's domain, yet helping when needed. Oliver never entered her bedroom without knocking, true to his promise to respect her boundaries. At night, he slept on a cot he'd set up in the small room that served as his office. Yet despite the propriety of their arrangement, Catherine found herself growing increasingly aware of Oliver as a man. She noticed the strength in his shoulders as he chopped wood, the gentleness of his hands when he held Emma, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. One evening, after Emma was asleep, they sat by the fire drinking coffee. Oliver had been quiet all day, and Catherine sensed something was troubling him. "Is everything all right?" she asked. He stared into his cup for a long moment. "The spring cattle drive is coming up," he said finally. "I'll be gone for about 3 weeks." "Oh," Catherine said, surprised by the pang of dismay she felt. "When do you leave?" "In 5 days," he replied. "Miguel will stay behind to help with the ranch, and Mrs. Hodges has offered to check on you regularly." "We'll be fine," Catherine assured him, though the thought of his absence left her oddly bereft. Oliver nodded, still staring into his cup. "I've been thinking," he said slowly. "Before I go, perhaps we should make our marriage official. At the church, I mean." Catherine set down her coffee. "Why now?" "Because if anything happened to me on the drive," he said carefully, "I want to be sure you and Emma are legally protected. As my widow, you'd inherit everything." "Nothing's going to happen to you," Catherine said, her voice sharper than intended. "Probably not," he agreed. "But cattle drives can be dangerous. It would ease my mind to know you're provided for, just in case." Catherine studied him, this man who continued to surprise her with his thoughtfulness. "All right," she agreed softly. "We'll go to the church." 2 days later, they stood before Reverend Walsh in the small white church at the edge of town. Catherine wore a new pale blue dress, and Oliver had donned his best shirt and string tie. Emma, dressed in a frilly white gown Catherine had made, slept peacefully in Mrs. Hodges' arms. The ceremony was brief, just the essential words and vows. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Oliver hesitated, then leaned forward to place a chaste kiss on Catherine's cheek. It was their first physical contact beyond helping her into the wagon, and Catherine felt her skin warm at his touch. The small gathering of witnesses, Mrs. Hodges, Miguel and his wife Rosalinda, and a few neighbors offered congratulations and joined them for a simple celebration at the town's restaurant. As they drove home that afternoon, Catherine felt different somehow. Though they had lived as husband and wife for nearly 3 weeks, the ceremony had changed something between them. This was real now, official in the eyes of God and the community. "Are you happy, Kate?" Oliver asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. The question caught her by surprise. "Yes," she said, realizing as she spoke that it was true. "I didn't expect to be, but I am." Oliver's expression lightened, and he reached over to briefly cover her hand with his. "I'm glad." That night, after Emma was asleep, Catherine found Oliver on the porch, staring up at the stars. "It's cold out here," she said, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Just thinking," he replied, shifting to make room for her on the bench. They sat in companionable silence, watching the moon rise over the distant mountains. Catherine was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the warmth radiating from his body in the cool night air. "Oliver," she said finally, gathering her courage, "I've been thinking about our arrangement." He turned to look at her, his expression guarded. "What about it?" Catherine took a deep breath. "You've been sleeping on that cot for weeks now, and it can't be comfortable." "I'm fine," he assured her. "I've slept in worse places." "That's not the point," Catherine said, her heart pounding. "We're officially married now." Oliver went very still. "Kate, I promised I wouldn't expect." "I know what you promised," she interrupted gently. "And I appreciated it. But things are different now." "How so?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Catherine met his gaze steadily. "Because I've come to care for you, Oliver. And I think I hope you care for me too." The vulnerability in his eyes nearly took her breath away. "I do," he said simply. "More than I can say." Catherine stood, offering her hand. "Then come inside, husband." Oliver rose slowly, as if afraid a sudden movement might shatter the moment. He took her hand, his rough palm warm against hers, and followed her into the cabin. In the soft glow of the lamp, Catherine led him to her bedroom, their bedroom now. When the door closed behind them, she turned to face him. "I'm not very experienced," she admitted, suddenly shy. "Thomas and I were only together for a short time before. We don't have to do this tonight," Oliver said, though his eyes told a different story. "We have time." "But you're leaving soon," Catherine reminded him. "And I want." She hesitated, then stepped closer, resting her hands on his chest. "I want us to be a true husband and wife before you go." Oliver's breath caught. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head and kissed her. His lips were gentle, questioning at first, then more insistent as she responded. Catherine felt warmth spread through her body as his arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Oliver rested his forehead against hers. "Are you sure?" he whispered. In answer, Catherine began unbuttoning his shirt. Later, lying in his arms, Catherine marveled at the turn her life had taken. From the desperation of the auction block to this a home, a husband who cherished her, security for her daughter. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but perhaps it was the life she was meant to have. "What are you thinking?" Oliver murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places," she replied, pressing a kiss to his chest. He tightened his arm around her. "For me too, Kate. For me too." The morning of Oliver's departure dawned clear and cool. Catherine woke to find him already dressed, sitting on the edge of the bed watching her. "I didn't want to wake you," he said softly. "I'm glad you did," she replied, sitting up and pulling the blanket with her. "I wanted to say goodbye properly." Oliver smiled, leaning forward to kiss her. What began as a gentle farewell soon deepened into something more urgent, and it was nearly an hour before they finally emerged from the bedroom. The men were already gathering in the yard. Miguel, the Parson brothers from the neighboring ranch, and 3 other hands hired specifically for the drive. The cattle had been rounded up the day before and waited in the south pasture, ready for the long journey to the railhead in Cheyenne. Catherine kept busy, serving coffee and biscuits to the men while Emma watched from her basket on the porch. When it was time to leave, Oliver knelt before the baby. "You be good for your mama, little one," he said, touching her cheek gently. "I'll be back before you know it." Emma grabbed his finger, gurgling happily, and Oliver's expression softened. He'd grown to love the child as his own over the past weeks. Rising, he turned to Catherine. "There's money in the lockbox in my desk if you need anything. Mrs. Hodges will check on you every few days, and Miguel's wife Rosalinda is staying in their cabin if you need help." "We'll be fine," Catherine assured him, fighting back tears. "Just come home safe." Oliver pulled her close, heedless of the men watching. "Nothing could keep me away," he promised, kissing her deeply. Then he was gone, riding at the head of the small procession as they moved the herd out of the valley. Catherine stood on the porch with Emma in her arms, watching until they disappeared from sight. The first week of Oliver's absence passed slowly. Catherine threw herself into household tasks, making preserves from the early fruits, sewing new curtains for the windows, and working in the small kitchen garden. Each night, she wrote in a journal Oliver had given her, recording the day's events and her thoughts to share with him when he returned. In the second week, a spring storm blew through the valley, bringing heavy rain that leaked through the cabin roof in several places. Catherine set out buckets and pans to catch the drips, making a mental note to tell Oliver about the problem when he returned. The third week brought unexpected visitors. Catherine was hanging laundry when she heard a wagon approaching. To her surprise, it was Vivian Harper, accompanied by an older man Catherine assumed was her father. "Mrs. Calloway," Vivian called, her smile thin. "I hope we're not intruding." "Not at all," Catherine replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Calloway is away on the cattle drive, I'm afraid." "We know," said James Harper, climbing down from the wagon. He was a portly man with hard eyes. "That's partly why we've come." Business that couldn't wait for his return. Catherine invited them inside, hurriedly clearing away Emma's toys from the main room. The Harpers sat stiffly on the sofa, declining her offer of refreshments. "Mrs. Calloway," James Harper began without preamble, "I'll come straight to the point. I'm concerned about a loan agreement I had with your husband." Catherine frowned. "Oliver never mentioned any loan." "That's just it," Harper said. We had a verbal agreement that he would take a loan to expand his operation. Papers were drawn up, but he never came to sign them. I see, Catherine said carefully. Perhaps you should discuss this with him when he returns. The thing is, Harper continued, his tone hardening. The terms of the loan were contingent on certain social arrangements that seemed to have been cast aside. Understanding dawned. You mean his courting your daughter, Catherine said bluntly. Vivian's cheeks flushed. Father, please. This is unseemly. Harper ignored her. Oliver Calloway led my daughter to believe he had intentions. Then he suddenly appears with a wife and child. His gaze flicked to Emma, sleeping in her cradle. A suspiciously mature child for a new marriage. Anger flared in Catherine's chest. Mr. Harper, my personal history is none of your concern. And if Oliver made no written agreement with you, I don't see that there's anything to discuss. Perhaps not, Harper conceded, his smile unpleasant. But I do control the bank, Mrs. Calloway. And ranching requires capital. Your husband's sudden change in circumstances might make it difficult for him to secure loans in the future. It was a thinly veiled threat, and Catherine recognized it as such. Are you saying you'll use your position to harm our ranch because Oliver chose to marry me instead of courting your daughter? I'm merely pointing out economic realities, Harper replied smoothly. Now, there is a way to resolve this situation amicably. The loan offer still stands with favorable terms if you were to step aside. Catherine stared at him in disbelief. You want me to leave my husband? With suitable compensation, of course, Harper added, as if discussing a business transaction. Enough to establish yourself comfortably elsewhere with the child. Father, Vivian protested, clearly mortified. Catherine rose to her feet, trembling with fury. I think you should leave now, Mr. Harper. The banker stood, his expression hardening. Think carefully, Mrs. Calloway. Oliver's dreams for this ranch require funding he can't generate on his own. Are you willing to be the reason those dreams fail? Get out, Catherine said, her voice low and dangerous. After they'd gone, Catherine sat heavily in Oliver's chair, shaken by the encounter. Would Oliver resent her presence if it cost him his plans for the ranch? Should she tell him about Harper's visit when he returned, or would that only add to his burdens? Before she could decide, Emma began to cry, hungry after her nap. As Catherine nursed her daughter, she resolved to stand her ground. Oliver had chosen her, had given them both a home and his name. She wouldn't let James Harper's threats drive a wedge between them. The fourth week brought no word from the cattle drive, though Catherine tried not to worry. Drives often took longer than expected, depending on weather and trail conditions. Mrs. Hodges assured her that no news was good news. Then, late one afternoon as Catherine was preparing supper, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Hurrying to the door, her heart leapt at the sight of Oliver dismounting in the yard. He looked tired and trail-worn, his skin darkened by the sun, but the smile that broke across his face when he saw her made her breath catch. Kate, he said simply, striding toward her. She flew down the steps and into his arms, heedless of propriety or his trail dust. Oliver held her tightly, burying his face in her hair. I missed you, he murmured against her neck. Every day. We missed you too, she replied, pulling back to look at him. Are you all right? The drive went well. Everything went fine, he assured her. Got a good price for the herd. Where's Emma? Napping, Catherine said. She'll be so excited to see you. She's been looking for you every day. Oliver's eyes softened. Has she? I've brought her something, a little wooden horse one of the men carved. And something for you too. From his saddlebag, he produced a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. Oliver, Catherine breathed. It's beautiful. Open it, he urged. Inside was a tiny lock of Emma's hair on one side, and, to her surprise, a small photograph of Oliver on the other. I had it taken in Cheyenne, he explained. Thought you might like to have it, especially when I'm away. Tears welled in Catherine's eyes. Help me put it on. Oliver's fingers brushed her neck as he fastened the clasp, sending shivers down her spine. When he finished, he didn't step away, but instead leaned down to kiss her deeply. I have so much to tell you, he said when they finally parted. About the drive, the plans I've made for the ranch. But first, I need a bath and a proper meal. And to see my daughter. Catherine smiled at the easy way he claimed Emma as his. I'll heat water for your bath while you look in on her. Supper's almost ready. That night, After a joyful reunion with Emma, a hearty meal, and a long soak in the metal tub, Oliver and Catherine sat before the fire while Emma played on a blanket at their feet. Oliver shared stories of the drive, the challenges they'd faced crossing rivers, the camaraderie around the campfire at night, the satisfaction of delivering a healthy herd and receiving a fair price. "We did well enough that I can hire another hand," he told her, "and maybe start building that addition to the house before winter." Catherine's happiness dimmed slightly as she remembered Harper's threat. "Oliver, there's something I need to tell you. We had visitors while you were gone, the Harpers." Oliver's expression darkened. "What did they want?" Catherine related the conversation, watching his face grow increasingly stormy. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. "I'm sorry they put you through that," he said finally, his voice tight with anger. "Harper has been trying to pressure me into an arrangement with Vivian for years. He wants to join our lands, create the largest holding in the county. He threatened to deny you loans," Catherine said quietly. "Will that hurt the ranch?" Oliver turned to her, taking her hands in his. "Kate, look at me. Nothing Harper can do will change how I feel about you and Emma. If I have to build this ranch more slowly, with my own 2 hands and no bank loans, then that's what I'll do." Relief washed over her. "You're not disappointed? In you?" "Never." He squeezed her hands. "Actually, I made a connection in Cheyenne, a cattle buyer named Richardson who's looking to invest in promising ranches. He's offered to back our expansion without Harper's involvement." Catherine smiled, her fears easing. "That's wonderful news." "There's more," Oliver said, his expression growing serious. "Being away from you and Emma these past weeks, it made me realize something." "What's that?" she asked, her pulse quickening at the intensity in his eyes. "That what started as an arrangement, a practical solution for both of us, has become something else entirely." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Catherine Calloway. And I love that little girl as if she were my own flesh and blood." Joy blossomed in Catherine's chest. "Oh, Oliver, I love you too. I think I have for weeks now." He gathered her into his arms, his kiss full of promise and passion. Emma gurgled happily from her blanket, as if approving of this turn of events. Later that night, lying in Oliver's arms, Catherine marveled again at the strange path that had led her here. From desperate widow to cherished wife in the space of 2 months. "What are you thinking?" Oliver asked, echoing his question from their first night together. Catherine smiled in the darkness. "That sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best ones." He pulled her closer. "I thank God every day that I was in Whisper Creek that afternoon." "As do I," Catherine whispered, resting her head on his chest where she could hear the steady beating of his heart. Summer faded into autumn, bringing with it change and growth. The ranch prospered under Oliver and Catherine's joint management. With Richardson's investment, they added 50 head of cattle to their herd and hired 2 more hands to help with the increased workload. Oliver broke ground on the house addition, 2 more bedrooms and a proper dining room, working on it whenever he could spare time from ranch duties. Miguel and the other hands pitched in, and by the first snowfall, the new rooms were enclosed, though the interior work would continue through winter. As Christmas approached, Catherine found herself feeling unwell in the mornings. After the 3rd day of nausea, she confided in Mrs. Hodges, who confirmed what Catherine had begun to suspect. "You're carrying, dear," the older woman said with a knowing smile. "I'd say the baby will come late next summer." Catherine was overjoyed but nervous about telling Oliver. Would he welcome another child so soon? That evening, after Emma was asleep, she found him in his office, poring over the ranch accounts. "Oliver," she said from the doorway, "could we talk?" He looked up, his smile immediate. "Of course. Is something wrong?" "No," she assured him, crossing to perch on the edge of his desk. "Something is very right, actually. I'm going to have a baby." Oliver's ledger slipped from his fingers. "A baby? You're certain?" Catherine nodded, watching his face anxiously. Mrs. Hodges confirmed it. "Are you?" "Please." Oliver rose so quickly his chair nearly toppled backward. In an instant, she was in his arms, his face buried in her hair. "Please doesn't begin to describe it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "A baby, our baby." "Oh, Kate." Relief and happiness flooded through her. "I thought you might think it was too soon, with Emma still so young." Oliver drew back to look at her, his eyes shining. Having you and Emma in my life is more than I ever dreamed possible. And now a child of our own making? It's a miracle. On Christmas morning, they shared the news with their small circle of friends who had gathered at the ranch for a holiday feast. Congratulations flowed, along with advice from the women and good-natured teasing from the men. Later, as they watched 8-month-old Emma delight in the colorful wooden blocks Oliver had carved for her, Catherine reflected on the year that was ending. She had begun it in grief and desperation, standing on an auction block with her baby in her arms. Now she sat in a warm home, beloved by a good man, with one child thriving and another on the way. Oliver, noticing her thoughtful expression, squeezed her hand. Happy? Catherine smiled, her heart full. Completely. Winter passed in a flurry of indoor activities. Oliver finished the interior of the new rooms, while Catherine sewed curtains and quilts to furnish them. Emma took her first steps in February, toddling precariously from Catherine to Oliver, her face alight with accomplishment. As Catherine's pregnancy progressed, Oliver became increasingly protective, insisting she rest frequently and hiring a local girl, Jenny Simmons, to help with household chores. Though Catherine protested that she wasn't an invalid, she secretly appreciated his concern. Spring brought new calves and the year's first cattle drive. This time, Oliver left Miguel in charge of the drive, choosing to remain at the ranch with his growing family. Catherine was grateful for his presence, especially as her pregnancy advanced, and caring for an active toddler became more challenging. One evening in early July, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Oliver broached a subject they had discussed only briefly before. "I've been thinking about Emma's future," he said, watching the little girl play with wooden animals in the yard. "And the new babies, too." "What about it?" Catherine asked, resting a hand on her swollen belly. "I want to adopt Emma formally," Oliver said. "Make her legally my daughter in every way. She already calls me Papa, but I want her to have my name too." Catherine's heart swelled with love for this man who had embraced her child so completely. "Nothing would make me happier," she said softly. "But I thought that might already be the case since we're married." Oliver shook his head. "The law is complicated. I've spoken with Judge Wilson about it. There would be papers to sign, but he says it should be straightforward since Emma's birth father is deceased." Catherine reached for his hand. "Then let's do it. Emma is yours in every way that matters. She should have your name." Oliver lifted her hand to his lips. "Thank you." 2 weeks later, the summer heat was at its peak when Catherine went into labor. Oliver sent one of the hands racing for Mrs. Hodges and the midwife, while Jenny took charge of Emma. The birth was long and difficult. By nightfall, Catherine was exhausted, her strength flagging. Oliver refused to leave her side, supporting her through each contraction, wiping her brow, and murmuring encouragement. "You can do this, Kate," he whispered as another pain gripped her. "You're the strongest woman I know." Just after midnight, their son was born, a robust boy with a shock of dark hair and a lusty cry that announced his arrival to the world. "He's perfect," Oliver said, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as the midwife placed the swaddled infant in Catherine's arms. "Just like his mother." "And his father," Catherine added tiredly, gazing down at their son. "What shall we call him?" Oliver's expression grew thoughtful. "What about Thomas? To honor his memory." Catherine looked up at her husband in surprise. Another man might have been jealous of her first husband, unwilling to acknowledge him. But Oliver's suggestion revealed the depth of his understanding and compassion. "Thomas Oliver Calloway," Catherine said, testing the name. "It's perfect." Oliver leaned down to kiss her gently. "Thank you for our son, Kate. For our family." The adoption papers for Emma came through in September, making official what had been true in their hearts for months. To celebrate, Oliver took a rare day away from ranch work, and they had a family picnic by the creek. Emma, now a chattering 18-month-old, splashed in the shallow water while baby Thomas slept in a basket under the shade of a cottonwood tree. "Do you ever think about that day in Whisper Creek?" Catherine asked as they watched Emma play. "The auction?" Oliver nodded slowly. "Sometimes. I think about how close I came to not being there. I almost sent Miguel to town for supplies that day." Catherine shivered despite the warm sun. "I can't bear to think what might have happened." "But it didn't," Oliver said firmly, pulling her against his side. "Instead, we found each other. We made a family. When you said you'd be father and husband both, did you have any idea what you were getting yourself into? Catherine teased. Oliver laughed, a deep, rich sound that still made her heart skip. Not the slightest, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat. As autumn painted the valley in gold and crimson, the Calloways received unexpected news. Thomas Adams's cousin, the man who had sold Catherine at auction, had been arrested in Denver for similar crimes. The sheriff came to take Catherine's statement, explaining that several women had come forward with tales of being transported across state lines and sold. Will I have to testify? Catherine asked, worry creasing her brow. Probably not, the sheriff assured her. They have enough witnesses already. But I thought you'd want to know he'll face justice. After the sheriff left, Catherine found Oliver in the barn, mending a bridle. She told him the news, watching his face darken with remembered anger. Good, he said simply. Though prison seems too good for him. Catherine touched his arm. It's over now. We have our life here, our family. Nothing else matters. Oliver set aside his work and drew her into his arms. You're right. But sometimes I think about how differently things might have gone if I hadn't been in town that day. I try not to think about that, Catherine admitted. It frightens me still. Never again, Oliver promised, tightening his arms around her. Nothing will ever threaten you or our children while I draw breath. Winter came again, bringing with it Christmas celebrations and Thomas's first birthday. The ranch house, now expanded and comfortable, was filled with the sounds of children's laughter, music from Catherine's organ, and the warm conversations of friends gathered to share in the Calloways' happiness. On New Year's Eve, with the children asleep and the house quiet, Oliver and Catherine sat before the fire, sharing a rare moment of solitude. I have something for you, Oliver said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small velvet box. What's this? Catherine asked, surprised. Christmas has passed. Open it, he urged. Inside was a ring, a delicate gold band set with 3 small diamonds that caught the firelight and scattered it in tiny rainbows. Oliver, she breathed. It's beautiful. When we married, I couldn't afford a proper ring, he explained. I wanted to give you one for our anniversary, but it seemed more fitting to wait until New Year's Eve. A marker for how far we've come in a year. Catherine slipped the ring onto her finger beside the simple gold band she already wore. It's perfect. The 3 stones are for our family, Oliver said quietly. You, Emma, and Thomas. Tears pricked at Catherine's eyes. I love it. And I love you. Oliver gathered her into his arms, his kiss tender yet passionate. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. Do you remember what you told me that first night we were together? He asked. About salvation coming from unexpected places? Catherine nodded, smiling at the memory. You were my salvation too, Oliver said softly. I had land, cattle, some measure of success. But I was alone, empty. You and Emma filled a void I didn't even know existed. And now? Catherine asked, tracing the scar along his jaw with gentle fingers. Oliver smiled, capturing her hand and kissing her palm. Now I have everything a man could want. A thriving ranch, healthy children, and a wife I fall more in love with each day. As midnight approached, they stood on the porch, watching stars appear in the clear winter sky. The ranch stretched before them, peaceful under its blanket of snow. In the distance, a coyote called, its cry echoing across the valley. What do you wish for in the new year? Catherine asked, leaning against Oliver's solid warmth. He thought for a moment, then smiled. Nothing more than this. You, our children, our home. It's everything I ever dreamed of and more. Catherine looked up at the man who had saved her in every way a person could be, save the man who had become father to her daughter and father to her son, husband to her heart. The man who had purchased her freedom and given her his name, his heart, his life. I was sold with a baby in my arms, she said softly. And you offered to be father and husband both. Did you ever imagine it would lead to this? Oliver shook his head. I hoped, but the reality has surpassed even my wildest dreams. As the year turned, Oliver Calloway kissed his wife beneath the vast Colorado sky, surrounded by the life they had built together. From desperation to devotion, from an auction block to a home filled with love, their journey had only just begun. And in the nursery, Emma and Thomas Calloway slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge even in their young hearts that they were cherished, protected, and part of a family forged not by blood alone, but by a love that had overcome the most unlikely of beginnings.